attendees of this webinar. I think before we start with the proceedings, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to all the doctors, nurses, hospital staff, health workers, police, and everyone else on the ground. With that, let us first understand that the humankind has always reacted to extreme challenges with extreme innovation. The technologies have tried to bring us closer even in these times of social distancing. Across the domains of engineering, medicine, science, economy, and arts, innovations are pouring in to find ways to identify, test, and build sustainable solutions at a pace previously thought to be improbable. In the first few months of 2020, just as much as the incredible human suffering the world has witnessed, the world has also seen path-breaking work across society. There have been fewer occasions in human history where politicians are consulting scientists, scientists are listening to medical doctors, laws are being changed, and social inequalities are being addressed at unprecedented levels. There's a lot more that we need to do, but let us first try to understand all that has already been done. Today, we have a panel spanning science, medicine, manufacturing, and environmental remediation. They have all not only been at the forefront of research in their own domain, they have also gone further to make the research accessible to the public. Our panelists today have truly been there and done that. We have with us Dr. Mridula Phatke, who is currently the Senior Advisor to the National Rural Health Mission and UNICEF. She was the Director of Medical Education and Research for the Government of Maharashtra, the ex-Vice Chancellor of the Maharashtra University of Health and Health Sciences. Apart from research in several diseases, including HIV, she has a deep experience on health systems and what it takes to make it work in all its vastness and diversity. She's a veteran in medical research and education, has taken several initiatives to update the public health system. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today. We have Professor...
And thank you, Anirvan. Good morning.
Thank you, ma'am. We have Professor B. Ravi, who is the chairperson of Mechanical Engineering in IIT Bombay, professor in charge of the Desai Sethi Center of Entrepreneurship and the Biomedical Engineering and Technology Incubation Center. He has guided several PhDs and master students, published more than 250 technical papers, filed several patents, and his book and his books on entrepreneurship are literally the go-to book for anybody who wants to start on entrepreneurship today. We are really glad to have you here, sir, and your experience in how to bring medical devices to the world will be extremely enriching in this discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Then we have Dr. Rajesh Biniwale, who is the principal scientist and head at the Cleaner Technology and Modeling Division. Apart from his core research in NEERI, he has translated many research projects to solve key environmental problems, including handling house waste, solid waste conversion to biogas, arsenic removal from water, and making natural biopesticides. The phytoid therapy that he developed uses plants for treatment of domestic sewage on site, thereby reducing the load of municipal sewage treatment. He has also worked on air quality monitoring and emission resource apportionment studies on 10 cities of Maharashtra. So we'll get started, and I would like to welcome, sir. Welcome, Dr. Biniwale.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me on this platform.
Okay. I would like to get started off with Dr. Phatke and get an understanding of two aspects the world is holding its breath on. What are the updates on therapies and vaccines, especially given the reports around newer aspects of COVID-19, including blood clotting? Dr. Phatke.
I think let me begin by saying, first of all, of course, I thank the Innovation Society and Saunik Madam. Well, COVID has really totally created a havoc in the whole world. And if there is one score that we don't like increasing, is the score of mortality in COVID. I mean, much as we are cricket fans, the scores always interested us. But every day on the TV, if you put it on for at least 1 hour, I think you feel that the world is really sinking. And the only hope that we can have, besides social distancing and besides washing hands, and besides wearing masks and all the other preventive measures, is that we are relying on variety of drugs. And that is, number one, the clinical trials, and number two, maybe the vaccine trials. So I will just briefly tell you what are the various clinical trials. At the outset, I'm frank enough and saying that there is no medicine as of today on COVID-19. All the doctors are beating around the bush to find out a breakthrough. And what are the various clinical trials that we can do on this? The epidemiological trials as to how the virus is affecting old and young, various caste, creed, social forms, the economic outflow of all this, the financial worries, and the clinical picture. All these trials are going to go on because they will tell us more about the virus. They will tell us what are the various manifestations. For example, the pediatric manifestations which have come up very new, if I have to tell you, the post-inflammatory disease and a Kawasaki-like syndrome is the new thing in pediatrics that has been known to us. But let us keep that aside. We also know so much about the origin of the virus. In fact, we don't know where the virus has come from. So we will straight away go on to what drugs are there for us and what clinical trials we can do for this. One very important trial that I might mention is the Solidarity trial of the WHO, a clinical trial which is initiated. It is a multi-country trial. And what is it using? We are using various drugs. The first drug is, like, we have got 4-5 groups. And the first group of patients will receive remdesivir, so much talked about on the TV every day that we feel that it is a magical cure. Let me tell you that remdesivir gave only 30% good results. That means the recovery time or the virus-free time for the patient to become free of the virus from 15 days is it came to 11 days, just the 30% recovery. So that's the Solidarity trial is going to be blinded, and they're going to use the first drug, which is remdesivir. The second group is going to get lopinavir and ritonavir. These are the drugs which are used for HIV/AIDS, and people are trying to find out whether that is giving us relief or not. The third combination is lopinavir, ritonavir, and interferon B. And this interferon B added to lopina and ritonavir, we think might give promising results. But of course, all this is double-blinded in the whole world. There are so many centers who have undertaken this Solidarity trial, and the results are yet to come. So we don't know whether this interferon B will work or not. The fourth drug is chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine. We know that ICMR has approved hydroxychloroquine as a prophylaxis. This is a drug commonly used for malaria, and we have a lot of hope in this drug. But there are some reports wherein they have said that hydroxychloroquine has not worked also. So this is about Solidarity trial, which is being used all over the world to get results. But as of today, we are still waiting for it. What is the next thing that we can think about in drug trials? Lots of people are trying many other prophylactic and therapeutic remedies. For example, ivermectin is a very commonly used deworming agent. And in vitro, that means in the laboratory in Australia, it was found that ivermectin decreased the viral load in 48 hours by 5,000 times. That means the patients nearly became viral negative in cultures, in the laboratory. So people are trying to use this drug for patients and see. Ivermectin is a very safe drug. Same is doxycycline, which we used to use in olden times. So what people are now doing is repurposing old drugs to find out whether they are working on the virus or not. Regarding clotting that you asked me, Anirvan, people are thinking that some clots do occur in the lungs, and therefore people are giving low-dose heparin therapy to find out, but we still have no idea whether they are working or not. So the long and short of what I have said is, I do not know anything which drug is going to work or which drug is not going to work. But maybe if we have this symposium after 4 or 5 weeks, we will get some ray of hope. And so we are not going to lose hope on one of the drugs which will work. My best bet still could be on, let's see, remdesivir, hydroxychloroquine. I have also to tell you about plasma. Plasma is being tried, and we think that that's going to be useful. And the next one is monoclonal antibodies. some people are trying monoclonal antibodies and some have got results. China already says that they have got very good results. And one interesting drug that I should mention is interferon beta. I have lots of hope in that drug because people are going to give it like an inhaler. You know how we have the aspirin inhaler for bronchial asthma. Inhaler, and it will be of great use to us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Phadke, for those very quick insights on all the treatment options that are available. With that thought on Heather, which gets into the medical devices category, we'll move on to Professor B. Ravi, who is an absolute expert in how to get medical devices off ground and then back to ground. Professor B. Ravi, some of the startups from BETIC are already on the front lines of COVID-19 work, including IU devices. What are your thoughts about the current ecosystem supporting disruptive technologies and the areas which need more attention to enable entrepreneurs to take more risks and create technologies in healthcare?
Yeah, thank you, Anirvan, and welcome to everyone here. Very good morning. We are, as Anirvan said earlier, we are in unprecedented a problem and challenges, but also I also see unprecedented collaborations happening. People dropping their egos, coming together to solve problems. As you said, government, academia, engineers, medical industry also are opening their doors. So I think we are seeing some fantastic things. So of course, all of you must have seen in news what is happening, but I'll just point out a few. And also I'll come down to the last point that Anirvan said, how do we really, go ahead into this domain? So quick examples from IIT Bombay itself, and I'm in touch with many other groups through the country. So for example, one of the devices which doctors really liked was, this is basically a chest problem, and then you need to be able to auscultate by putting a stethoscope. But many doctors who are senior, they don't want to go near the patient. So how do we do a chest auscultation without touching the patient or going near the patient? So one of the innovations that came out of BETIC was this device called as digital or smart stethoscope. So the stethoscope is de-linked with the doctor. So a caregiver or a patient himself or herself or even a nurse can put the stethoscope on the patient chest, and doctor can be anywhere. It could be in the next room or in his house, and they can hear. So that is one which worked very well. Now this group also tied hands with another group, and they set up what is called as a smart COVID booth, in the sense that the doctor is on one side of the partition, the patient other side, mainly for screening, for example. So they are doing this. And we recently got a call from the Jagjeevan Ram hospital, which is a COVID hospital, to set up the booth there also, and a stethoscope for them also. Then there's another group from the Desai Sethi school called JANU. They developed a robo which can be remotely controlled to go inside the ICU or patient's location to supply maybe food or maybe drugs or maybe checkup or things like that. That is just some of them. Apart from these, of course, the basic stuff of face masks. A lot of groups are now making face masks of all kinds of things. There was one group which made a face mask with 2 layers, and you could put and you could slip in something which is in between the 2 layers to protect it more. There are now research groups which are looking at coatings on the face mask to repel or maybe kill the virus on contact. Similarly, personal protective equipment, the face shields, the entire gowns, there are a lot of groups which are now actually manufacturing those things. But the king of all these things actually is a ventilator. And I must mention that there are 2 kinds of ventilators. People are getting confused. There's so many news items. There is what is called as a automated bag, ambu bag, which is basically nothing but a bellows kind of a thing. And in an emergency, when a patient is taken in an ambulance to hospital, you respirate the patient by pressing the bellows into the patient's mouth. Okay, that is a manual operation. And what 90% of things which you see in the newspaper are basically nothing but automated ambu bags. You just make a machine to automatically do the bellowing of the thing. That is one thing, but that is not really good for ICU. I mean, ICU needs ventilators which can really judge whether patient is trying to take a breath, adjust the breath accordingly, do a constant volume, constant pressure. There are like 15 different modes of operation to depending on patient's condition and changing condition of the patient. So those are high-fi equipment which are ICU ventilators, and these take years to develop, and they cost like 10 lakh, 15 lakh rupees. Even the cheapest one costs about 8-10 lakh rupees. And at some point of time, India estimated that they had, I think, something like a few thousand ventilators, and maybe 20,000 was the estimate by some group. Bombay, I was told they had only about 200, for example. So you can imagine the whole country has about 20,000 maybe. And I know that all these 200 are already occupied in Bombay, and the demand that government is projected by June is 2 lakh ventilators. And we do not have any domestic manufacturers of the top end ventilators. So we have something like intermediate basic ventilators. So what government did, just to go into a little more detail, and I'll answer Anirban's point in a minute. What government did was to place orders obviously on those GE and Draeger and all the German and American companies. But obviously you can imagine that they are already flooded with orders from other countries, Italy and Europe and all those. Second that government did was they're saying that, okay, whoever is manufacturing ventilators in the country. So there's one company called Agwa, then there's one called Scanray in South, Agwa in North. They said you somehow increase your production by joining hands with some other groups. So Agwa joined hands with Maruti, this Scanray joined hands with BEL and DRDO. So they are now trying to increase. But even then, we're talking about total production in the country, 2,000 per month, 3,000 per month upper limit. What we need is 10 times more within the next 2-3 months. So government did a third strategy, and that is not yet in the news completely. Maybe you can see glimpses of that here and there. They also said that any group which can develop and test and go through the entire regulatory things and get into manufacturing, we will allow them to come up in the whole thing. So they put out the purchase request for about, I think, 20,000 or 60,000 ventilators like that. And again, 4 or 5 groups are picked up. One group is from IIT Kanpur, one is from IIT Bombay, and again, some of those companies also are in the fray. Imagine trying to develop in maybe 2 months what would take 2 years in general. Okay, we are talking about a space rocket or satellite, a very complex machinery with more than 100-200 parts, all kinds of valves and sensors and software and user interface and things like that. But I'm very happy to tell you that, and I've been watching the scene very closely because I also sit through now multiple government agencies, DBT, BIRAC, DST, and ICMR, and so on. We are seeing these groups and many other groups doing many other devices, crashing the entire development time from what would take maybe months to maybe weeks and days. And the ventilator, for example, I just mentioned to you, you will hear it in the news within next maybe 2 to 3 weeks. The first ventilators developed completely in India, designed in India, going into production within, I would say, 3 weeks to 4 weeks. And in June, you would have Indian production of, I would say, at least 500,000, but they will ramp up to within a month to maybe 2,000 to 5,000. And that's like complete made in India. What government is doing in the sense and how people are getting together, I'll just say that and close my part. What is happening is that we are seeing that doctors are on, like, although they're busy with treating the COVID patients and in general answering questions from their own family members and friends and your housing colonies, they are gone out of the way to tell us, and things are changing so fast, exactly what is needed in a ventilator, specifications. Ventilator specifications run into something like 2-3 pages, about 30, 40, 50 points. Okay, so what are those points which are critical, not so critical, what means what? That is, doctors are contributing there. Engineers are working, imagine, they can't go to labs, they're working from homes. So imagine 50 people, groups of people working from respective homes using this Zoom and various software like TeamViewer to actually control each other's computers and valves and sensors and all that. They are working from homes. We have government coming in saying that any COVID-based project or institutions, we will fast track the approvals. So I have sat through, I now lost count, maybe I must have sat through at least or reviewed at least 200 to 500 proposals in the last 1 month. Okay, and cleared maybe hundreds of crores of proposals in the last 1 month. So government is fast tracking what would take again months. And the last part is manufacturers. People who have shut their shops, there are no people in the things. They were opening shops or godowns in the middle of the night. Remember, there's no transport in the beginning of this lockdown. Lockdown 1, there was no transport. So there was people who are taking risk, getting police permissions, going on scooters or those pickup vans, So we have seen an incredible, of course, problem and challenge, but also incredible amount of collaboration. The way people are working is worth like Bollywood movies. I really hope we will come out very well to the whole thing. I do not think we have seen the peak yet in India. I think it is going to go from bad to worse to worse. Personally, I feel from listening to all the doctors. But I think we're also seeing a great spirit, human spirit, great people dropping their egos, collaborating, prioritizing. We have seen the prioritizing of what is or redefinition of what is called essential. Now we know agriculture is essential, healthcare is essential. Maybe education comes somewhere, maybe fourth or fifth. I won't even say education is in the top five. But I think this redefinition and hopefully this lockdown, if it continues for another 1 or 2 months, we may even change our habits of my wife says that if I can see people not spitting on the roads, that would be a great result of this pandemic. So I'll close here. I don't want to take the time, but I will look forward to more questions and we will be happy to answer any specific questions also. Thank you so much, thank you very much for being patient.
Sure, Professor Ravi, that was incredibly insightful, especially again stressing on the huge amount of collaboration that is going on around the world and certainly in India. Coming to Dr. Biniwale now, with all of this work going on in manufacturing, diagnostics, treatment, and all of that, it is a concern about how do we dispose of hospital waste. Much of it is going to be biohazardous. And even in manufacturing, with increased waste from the manufacturing centers itself. So Dr. Biniwale would like to understand the current practices in India, especially with some focus on large metropolis such as Mumbai, and the state of the art elsewhere in the world, and how could we improve and take ideas from across the world and improve here in India. Sir, to you.
Yeah, thank you, Anirudh. I would like to speak. The question you have asked is very relevant. I would specify a few points on that, but I would also like to speak on one more point, which I will be doing it within a given time. You were asked question about the what kind of waste will be generated and how do we handle. So one of the very important waste, which was before we were not knowing that waste before, is a used mask. And the problem of this used mask is it is being generated at our every household, whether educated, not educated, and different class of the society, it is getting generated. Now, these may not be contaminated with the COVID-19 coronavirus, definitely contaminated with various pathogens. Because when you wear this mask, you are likely to have the viruses and bacteria on this mask. And it is equally dangerous to throw this mask into the garbage, which is being usually disposed of. We have been just last 2-3 years, we have been educating people for disposal of sanitary napkins, which is equally dangerous in that situation. But now we have another things to handle at our hand and at a much larger number. Therefore, this is one of the first, I would say, is looks very simple, but at the same time, it is very important to educate the people on this because this is public awareness and education has to be done on this particular aspect. Big treatment processes are not going to help here because otherwise it is a collection, segregation, collection, and all those problems which we have been dealing for decades for this waste management in the country. So to remove from there, we will have to make a mask such that it can be disposed of along with the normal waste. And for that, some household treatments has to be generated. There is a platform called Research for Residents Foundation, with which I am also working. RFRF, IIT Delhi, and NIDI together has developed one film on this, which I will send it to you. You can distribute it so that we can make aware people what is to be done at the household so that you can dispose of this mass. So that's the first waste which I am talking about. Second waste, which is generally now is being also looked into as a monitoring device for the spread of coronavirus, is a sewage. People have started studies on examining the sewage to find out how the coronavirus spread is occurring and what kind of phenomena can occur further down the line. Sewage, I have always been saying this much before this coronavirus. I think last 15 years I am talking to people. When it comes to the hospital sewage, when it is coming to the, I'm not talking about the effluent from the hospital, I'm talking about sewage being generated into the hospital wards where people are being treated inpatient kind of thing. A lot of antibiotics has been administered over there, and a lot of other drugs are administered over there, and most of them are used by the body, but a lot of them are not used by the body, and urine has to discrete it from the body, and therefore it comes into the sewage. What it creates is the problem of first is killing of your bacteria in the secondary treatment of sewage treatment, but over a period of time, bacteria learns to live with it, and they try to eat it, and therefore there is a generation of superbugs which are antibiotic resistance bacteria, which is already we are saying that in Delhi we are seeing those antibiotic resistance bacteria. These are very dangerous situations to come, and therefore sewage treatment has to be dealt with in a very different manner. I have been giving designs like the pre-oxidation mechanisms before the secondary treatment starts, and therefore the bacteria do not see the antibiotic molecule as such itself. Now, beyond these antibiotic molecules, we'll have to deal with a lot of pathogens also, including this kind of viruses. Viruses, there are some good viruses also. Good viruses is like a bacteriophage, which is there in the Ganga, which is taking care of a lot of bacterial infection, therefore increasing the self-purification capacity of Ganga. But apart from those good viruses, there are too many bad viruses, means pathogenic viruses, and which can have a really lot of impact on your health. So both solid waste and the liquid waste point of way, we will have to deal with it. Now, it's not only the hospital waste, it is now the colonies and the residential colonies and the individual homes will also generate this kind of waste, which will have the pathogens. It was generating, pathogens are the part of the waste, but at the same time, the pathogens which are contagious like coronavirus are more seriously to be looked into. So something has to be changed into the system, some monitoring, treatment, and everything has to be changed. We are targeting that as well. Now, apart from this, there are a few things which I wanted to say was like both Dr. Phadke and Professor Ravi has spoken on aspects of the treatment, either drugs or the treatments which are like physical support to the patient. But there are few things which are still need to be done, because when the classrooms will start, when the malls will start, when we are going to the shops to buy our groceries, we are not sure whether that place is safe or not. So we will have to deal with the destruction of the virus which is on the surface or suspended in air for some time. At least sometime it gets suspended, because it's not the virus which is traveling by the air, but the droplets which are the micro droplets coming out of from the nose by the sneezing and other things, they hang over there for more than 10-15 minutes. These are some of the studies which have been shown worldwide. And there is a Japanese study which has also been circulated as a kind of a simulated video. So it shows that almost 10 minutes it will be there. So when I enter into any such place, I'm not sure what is the place, whether the place is safe or not. So there are something which we have started one device testing along with some of the medical universities. This is from one of the forum which I'm seeing, RFRF, which is I'm involved into that, where we have stated that we will have a kind of a non-thermal plasmas and for the treatment of the surfaces, which will be like in 11 milliseconds, these viruses will get inactivated. We can't call them killed because they are not living when they are outside the body. But they can be deactivated with their S protein, which is a kind of a tentacles which is coming out from the coronavirus. So that can be done. So these kind of devices, and then there are some evidences of nanomaterials being coated on certain things for the destruction. This will make the places safe to enter, and we can trust those areas. And therefore, the normalcy of the life, they will be coming to the old normal, not new normal. New normal is the new word which is coming up, and which I believe, in my own opinion and all my consideration, it is going to be not more than 1.5 years, because we have a Spanish flu in 1918, and it has been few months, 13 months or 14 months was there, and world has come back to the normal. So a human being will come back to the normal, that I surely know. Similar things can be done on the PPE coatings, that antiviral coating. Bacteria coating is antibacterial coating is very well known for the PPEs, but antivirus coatings are not so known. Therefore, the manufacturing of viral coated PPE material is going to be one of the important aspects. So it is like another ecosystem other than the treatment methodology has to be created, and this has to be done in a very large way. And last 2 points would be like when Professor Ravi has saying on another part of it that a lot of people have come up with a lot of proposals, and we need people or agencies who would be doing the testings of this, not only the efficacy but also for the other aspects of the devices. Say generally the scientists are very passionate and very focused, and therefore they lose bird eye views, and the bird eye views lost is definitely a big challenge. And many of these fail because of some other reasons, not because of the purpose for which it is made. For example, the non-thermal plasma device, which I am saying, has already been tested in US for many other things, like for the its possible interference with the ventilator or the other monitoring devices in the hospital wards. So it should not interfere. If it's electronic device, it should not also interfere with other devices which are there. So several systems, there are 20 tests which has been done on such device, and therefore it becomes important. The testings of the device not only for the efficacy but for the safety also becomes. And last but not the least, of course, one more point which education he has already touched, which I am not going to touch, but the online education is going to be a current phenomena for next 2 years, but not more than that. But the point which I want to make is the supply chain mechanism. Supply chain mechanism, even what he was, Professor Ravi was talking about the number of ventilators to be manufactured with the collaboration and other things. That's one aspect of it. There are several other aspects of the supply chain, and I hope there would be some portal, which are already some existing portals are there for the procurement, but there could be some other portals which would be there, which will be sufficiently given on the uniformity of the price, reasonability of the price, and the quality of the product, tested, certified kind of product. So supply chain mechanism along with this kind of things would be also a definitely important aspect. I will stop here. Further down the line, we will go ahead with the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Biniwale. I think that was incredibly insightful, especially starting on the point of something as simple as how do we now discard the millions and millions of masks that we are going to use. I think that is an incredible insight, Doctor. I'm just going to switch gears here before we start taking questions from others. A few questions again around the panel. Dr. Phadke, just wanted to understand. There are some differences in India on the mortality rate from Maharashtra, Mumbai, and then West Bengal and Gujarat. There seems to be significant differences in different parts of India. Your thoughts on that, and if there are some key concepts around that which could be addressed. Dr. Phadke. I think we'll wait for her to join back. Maybe she's busy on a call. I'll come to you, Dr. Biniwale, again, since we are on the topic. This concept about surveillance of the sewage. This is a very interesting concept, and it's been around for a while. And fortunately, in IIT Bombay, as a postdoc, I did some work around that with Professor Kiran. And we found new giant viruses, which we call, they're non-pathogenic. But the whole idea was to develop scalable mechanisms of ability to detect novel pathogens or novel viruses and bacteria. And that is around metagenomics and genomics. Do you think that some of these new technologies will play a crucial role as we go forward, and the opportunities for industries and startups to join in?
Yeah, surely there are many opportunities here, because as you understand, since you said you have been working on that, as you understand, it is not that straightforward to identify the viruses, actually isolate the viruses and then find out which viruses are those from the sewage, because sewage is a highly contaminated thing, which is not that pure. And further, it's not a biological research, it's definitely waste research, and therefore it becomes a more complicated at this point of time. What you are talking about is identification of these viruses in the real time, or possibly as rapid as possible. So rapid PCRs is one of the things which we are looking for, that somebody can give us those kind of mechanisms or other mechanisms wherein the viruses can be detected at a very quick level. Say, for example, you can think of what we call is a molecular sieves. Molecular sieves is a mechanism where you can differentiate at the micro levels, micrometer levels, the differences between, or even nano levels, you differentiate between the particles. And the first differentiation between the particles could come as a for the viruses differentiation. That could be one of the possibility which, and then the functionalized material will take up certain things. Like, for example, it's almost like lock and key mechanism where your antibodies are generated and to try to do certain things. Such mechanisms can also be thought over. So for the quick detection of the viruses. Number two is the information which is being generated for decades now on the sewage treatment and all those kind of characterization of the sewage to such a detail, which is not so rampantly available. It is rarely being done because very less parameters are monitored by these people when they actually run the sewage treatment plants. So what I am thinking was, if these data can be collected and the artificial intelligence and machine learning kind of mechanisms are used, we can probably go ahead with certain rapid methods where you can really say once the sewage is flown and it is flown 10 kilometers or 100 kilometers from your place, even detecting that will not actually get you into any preventive mechanism. Only thing is you are going to go and then try to control, or the damage control kind of mechanism will be there. So instead of that, if there's some rapid things are there, and if I can recognize it, I would love to have something like online, but it is a distinct feature. But in meantime, there are some, as I said, these 2 points are there, and where we can really have opportunities for entrepreneurs also, or innovators also to look into it. And for the entrepreneurs, they need not to look at the basic research. They need to look at the application. Basic research being done by the scientists. So we should be application oriented in terms of entrepreneurship.
Thank you for those thoughts, Dr. Beniwale. Just circling back to you, Professor. So with these new technologies of AI and ML and edge computing coming in to diagnostic devices, how do you think we will be coping up with the regulatory aspects of this, where now that several medical devices will not only be there will be more than just silicon and other things, a lot of software being involved. How do you foresee the regulatory changing around the medical device industry?
You remember to switch on the mics. Okay, so regulatory is a so-called hurdle in the whole development process. But again, I would like to say that the CDSCO, which is the central government regulatory body for which clears both clinical trials, human clinical trials, you're supposed to inform and get permission from them, apart from the hospitals where you do the thing. And also the final certification licensing of the device for mass production and marketing. The CDSCO has been incredibly fast. I mean, they are now responding within 24 hours, and if clearing within, I would say, a week, couple of weeks, depending on the class of the device, of course. But doesn't mean that anyone is cutting corners, because if it's a low risk device, let us say something that doesn't go inside the body. So let's say, let's say your PPE or face mask, whatever. These are being cleared very fast. But if you have a high-end device, let's say ventilator, which I mentioned to you, or some kind of implants or stents, they go through a lot of processes, and that's not being shortened. That's the reason why even a new vaccine is not that even if someone has developed, it will take a couple of years to actually be available in the market, because the process is, it takes time to do the whole thing. But let me answer one more question which came up on the side. I mean, there were questions from, I think, Pratima, maybe she left, but saying that what are the opportunities for new startups, and also there's separate discussion going on the chat box saying, is an ultraviolet based disinfectant, is it okay, not okay? What are other medical devices that could be developed and so on? My generic answer to that is, we already talked about many things, but remember, if you just look around, answer to all the young people and even those who want to provide solutions or create entrepreneurships out of this, my general answer is that just look around yourself and look for a problem which is affecting enough number of people. For example, again, at our own home, the big question is, how do we take the milk packet from the milkman? Do we let him put it on the floor? Do we let him come inside? Do we put a bag outside? I mean, look at that. there are people who are asking that how do I disinfect my mobile phone and purse and things like that. And earlier, Dr. Biniwale talked about the disinfection of maybe shops, maybe classrooms. How do you do all those things? So several groups I know are working on the ultraviolet ray kind of a thing. The specific spectrum, I think, is UVB or something like that, or UVC, I think, which is supposed to kill the germ, but is also harmful to human beings. So people are talking about creating some kind of a box. You put your purse and mobile phone in the box, shut the lid, switch on like a microwave oven, it will disinfect the whole thing. We are also talking about a handheld kind of a thing which will go around the shops and you can create and disinfect the surfaces. So if you just look around yourself, you will find problems. And if you feel problems are there for enough number of people, you have business opportunity there. But like in anything, the problem definition, specifications, creating innovative ideas, converting the ideas into proof of concepts, going around to people and saying, do you think this makes sense? Then creating a proper prototype, functional prototype, making some initial batch, 10, 20, 50 pieces, again, go back, distribute the samples. So innovation process is a standard way of doing such things. So I would encourage every young person here to think creatively, but also verify the ideas. Do not just go and develop something for next few months and then find it is not needed by the market or by the customers. So always verify with your end users and do that. So to reiterate what I said earlier, everyone, including government regulatory agencies, are fast tracking these permissions. So take advantage of that. A lot of money also is flowing in. There are a lot of different agencies, government agencies, private agencies. I have gotten phone calls from L&T and Mahindra and many other companies, Bharat Forge, who are saying, is there anything that we could help you with? So don't be hesitating about creating new ideas and taking. There are all kinds of people who are willing to help you. Just take the first step, identify a good problem and create a proof of concept and maybe put it out. If you want to file a patent, but I'm saying this is the time when patenting also is just ensure that the credit goes to you in some way. You don't necessarily have to patent also, or usually, though it's a very important step. But let me take other questions once it come in. Thank you.
Dr. Anirvan, I am on the line. I connected.
Yes.
Dr. Anirvan, hello. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Phadke. So as I was kind of asking the question about the differences in the mortality rates that we are seeing across in different states in India. Do you have any initial thoughts or understanding on that?
Yeah, I think we are saying that India as a country, we have done well, and that our mortality statistics are only 3% mortality. But we have to keep a few things in mind. Number one, our population is relatively young as compared to the population in the West. Number two, our testing is probably not all that adequate, and every patient who is critically ill is not tested for COVID. So when we say that so-and-so died of a heart attack, or he died of a renal cause, or he died of, say, some tumor, and we have not tested him for COVID, then in which case it is extremely difficult to find out whether he really died because of COVID, which was we can say, the last straw on the camel's back. So regarding statistics, that's one point that I have to say. Second, people keep on saying that the viral strain has mutated, and now the strain that we have got in Gujarat or the strain we have got that in somewhere else is more strong and more virulent. Well, let me tell you, as of today, there are lots of strains that we have seen, more than 30 strains, and with small mutations here and there. Being a coronavirus, it is notorious for mutating. But only one strain which is worth the mention, which I might mention in the latest literature, is an Arizona strain, the strain from Arizona, wherein they found that the strain had a big chunk of mutation. 80 letters had gone from the genomic sequence. And this mutation is exactly like SARS. So how SARS disappeared from the world? By this kind of a mutation. But this is found only in Arizona. So I think the S strain and L strain and the spike protein and all those strains and the changes, as of now, again, we don't know the answer.
Thank you, Dr. Phadke, for those remarks, and I think they're very well taken. I'm trying to see online if there are some questions. I think Professor Ravi has already answered some of these questions around UVC. Is just checking on some of the questions. Sijo, if you have some questions that you have spotted, or the panelist. So, okay, there is a question around telemedicine. Maybe Professor Phadke or Professor Ravi, either of you can take it. How do you see telemedicine actually evolving in, from this crisis?
Telemedicine is very good, but the Medical Council of India and the Maharashtra Medical Council, a few years ago, we were all really skeptical about doctors advising their patients either on WhatsApp or on telephonic conversations, thinking that it may not be so very ethical and that sometimes you may miss some basic clinical finding which you see when you see the patient. But now in the days of social distancing, we are saying when you are even going to immunize a child, the child will remain in your clinic only for 5 minutes and then is again taken back. So if you're not going to see patients and you're going to treat them on telemedicine, there is an enormous scope for it. And I saw all those lovely things that the stethoscope comes out and you can hear the heart sounds even by a distant means. All those technologies will develop, and we are looking forward to Professor Ravi telling us what technologies will come. But finally, human brain is brain, and seeing the person as a patient is also equally important. I mean, you can have everything E, but you can't have an E patient ultimately. So finally, you have to have the patient in front of you as a medical person. But we are all game for it. We are all doing telemedicine. I might also mention on telemedicine that in Anganwadis and in some of the villages, we have already started conducting the ICDS clinics and all on telemedicine, and patients are coming only with their little problems and they are given treatment, and the pharmacist on the spot prescribe. So that's how we are doing.
That's amazing insights into that, Dr. Phadke. Professor Ravi, a quick word on that from you.
Yeah, quick thing. So earlier I mentioned this smart stethoscope, for example, which is allowing doctors to, you can say the nursing staff to check the auscultation, chest sounds, and even they can even do real-time transmission or even record the sound and they can send it back. And you also asked me earlier the question about AI/ML, which I forgot to answer. And what they're doing is they are now collecting all these sounds, chest sounds, heart sounds, breathing sounds, and so on. They already had earlier classified, for example, to how to distinguish between asthma and different levels of COPD and so on. But now they're talking about how do we, if you have enough sounds, but for AI/ML, you need thousands of library of sounds. Once you have 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, then you can start writing algorithms, and you should be able to detect maybe the onset of this the COVID, which really affects the breathing patterns, right? And it's much earlier, and its breathing pattern is much different. People are talking about happy hypoxia. I mean, generally oxygen level falling in the blood below 90 is dangerous. Here it is falling more than 20%, 30%. People have no idea. And if you remember the earlier pictures of China, people falling in the streets, I think it is yet to emerge, but some people are saying it is happening, but people are not showing. So alarming conditions, but Dr. Mridula can maybe talk about that. But telemedicine is not just this much. For example, I mean, every other condition at this point of time, dialysis patients are in deep trouble. Okay, people who have tooth pain, what do they do? Okay, pregnancies, major issues. So, for example, one more group which is doing has an application. I forgot the name of the company. So they have a application software and a kit also, by which a pregnant mother, I could even be ASHA worker, can monitor the pregnancy. Is it happening properly? Is it safe? So telemedicine is a big thing. And why telemedicine? Tele-education, tele-meetings, what you're doing now. In fact, now these meetings are becoming so very, let me tell in lighter vein to everyone here in the room. See, earlier when we would have a meeting in the morning in Delhi and afternoon in Bangalore, we would say that, sorry, today I'm in Delhi, I can't do Bangalore meeting. Now they're saying, no, Bangalore meeting will shift it to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So we have meetings now starting at 9 a.m., 10 a.m., going up to 10 p.m., 7 p.m., midnight, okay, and official meetings that I'm talking about. So we are actually doing double the work, okay, honestly speaking. But I'm so happy that the travel cost is not there. Is lighter on the environment. Okay, all the billing and everything is not required. So we are actually being more productive. IIT Bombay Senate meetings, we have about 600 faculty. It will be difficult to get even 10% to get to Senate meeting. Nowadays, you have 300 people at the end of 3-hour meeting. Our director saying that we will switch to only online mode. Okay, so my point is that this pandemic is also changing our lifestyle in some sense. Everything is going to happen. Telemedicine, tele-education, everything except what is actually produced. Let's say you can't do even farming. Can we take a patch of land somewhere? And can I do agriculture sitting here? I think it should be possible. And this is my answer to all the people who are writing on the chat boxes. What are the opportunities for the young entrepreneurs? Plenty. Just look around. Just think about it. Okay.
Can I answer one thing? And I want to ask Professor Ravi. I have every time in my mind that you're making us do everything tele, you're making us see the patient. Can you not give us some COVID kind of a suit which will be like a raincoat? And I'm sure people must be making, which is as airtight with a mask over it and maybe some small air conditioner or something which regulates the temperature, small machine. And we just move around. Then the tele-distancing and the social distancing and everything else will go away. We'll have to have hand washing, but that's all right. And if there's a little air conditioner, as doctors, we won't feel so very suffocated. Only thing is the type of filters that you will have will be either like the surgical mask, or if we are very near real patients, it will be like the N95 mask. So maybe Professor Ravi, next meeting in next month, you should give us those corona suits. Anyway, people are naming their children as COVID and Dushant Singh. So we may have a corona suit as well.
Yeah. So to young people in this, or even entrepreneurs in this group, what Dr. Mridula just now said is a very dire requirement now. Doctors are calling us and telling that the PPE suit, the personal protective equipment suit, which is there, it is maybe good for those American countries and European countries, but here, the moment you wear the suit, within 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you start sweating. It's very hot. Okay. And these are discarded suits.
We are really suffocating. We are suffocating.
Very, very suffocating. So the two things which doctors have said they want, one is that can you put a oxygen concentrator, something like that, so or filter and concentrator. Number two, a cooling unit so that you can carry something on your back, not very heavy weight, a lightweight cooling pack. So here is a chance for innovation again, and that's badly needed. That is one part. I just want to also mention that one group that I know, Betic itself, what they did was to come up with a you can say like a mosquito net. Just think about a mosquito net, not made of a net, but made up of a plastic sheet. But the sheet has some kind of a arms stitched into that. So patient stays inside the enclosure. Doctor can put the hands inside without going inside the net. So it's some kind of a patient enclosure, and patient and doctors and nursing staff are separate. This guy actually invented the whole thing, but now he's sitting in Kerala, the guy who invented that. And I'm saying get some manufacturing companies to, the whole point is, how do you get the manufacturing people to open doors? The workers have to come back to factories, logistics have to move. So invention is not so difficult. We can make one prototype, but manufacturing large numbers and getting them supply is actually a major challenge. We'll see how this lockdown is moving to 4.0 and 5.0, how states are opening up. But Bombay, as you know, Bombay is in very bad shape. All of you know that. I think it's going to go even worse maybe. We'll see.
Okay, I think we are almost out of time. Just some final comments from Dr. Biniwale. I think while a lot of things will become tele, the waste management will still need to be on ground. But still, there is an opportunity to actually localize and do a lot. I mean, from initial at point at source segregation, society level work, that can reduce the load on municipal level waste management. So some final thoughts on that. How can we localize some very specific waste management?
Yeah, you touched a very important point at the in situ treatment of the possible waste, which has to be done at the site. And this is already started to a large extent that biodegradable waste has been asked to be treated in the societies itself, not to be picked up by the municipal corporations, so that the load on the municipal corporation goes down. According to 2016 solid waste rules, we have to actually stop anything going to the landfills. That means we have to segregate, we have to recycle, reuse, and then treat in situ. This kind of mechanisms has to be there. Now, one more mechanism will get added into this is the monitoring and tracing of it. Okay, how exactly it has been done and what is that level it has been treated to, so that it is safe in the environment. Because many of times when you start getting this into the hands of many people who are supposed to handle it, there are different constraints, constraints of the knowledge, constraints of the training, constraints of finance, several things can happen. And therefore, the challenge becomes something else other than the technology. And therefore, we need some extensive monitoring methods on this, where it actually has been stabilized into the environment or not. So that is going to be one more point. There were some 2 or 3 questions and one comment on something on the NIRI things. I'll just quickly would like to address that. One is NIRI working on the color changing disinfectants? That was one thing somebody has asked. And the same person probably asked as whether we are working on the rapid testing methods. So color changing things, we are surely not working on it right now, because that our priorities set here are different. We are one of the authorized COVID testing lab also now. So our priorities have changed a lot in a few that's a few months, like 1 or 2 months recently, and we have doing certain lot of things. Rapid testing methods, yes, people at our genomics labs are working on this to find out whether we can rapidly do this test. We can reduce this time from something like 10 hours to 6 hours, 6 hours to 2 hours, if that can be done, or even to the 10 minutes at the end of the day. Definitely from the PCR. Other things like XRD and X-ray things and other things, that would be different stories. But I'm talking about the PCRs itself. So the rapid things, that one. And the one comment which has come, 2 of them was like um, people have started working on the antiviral coatings on the PPE, and some other people, person, Premendra Singh, who has said that they have already wanting some testings of the PPE in virology lab. And the point which is also mentioned here was the kind of suffocation which is being, as Dr. Fatke and Professor Ravi was discussing. So how do we work on that? What kind of material and methodology specifications can be formed? So yes, we can help out and testings in the virology labs, which has got BSL-2 level certification, which is important to handle some of the viruses. BSL-2 certification, BSL-3 practices. So these things can be definitely done, and that's all currently for.
Dr. Benivane, I have one question actually. See, I mean, the kitchen waste that comes out of every day, the vegetable waste that comes out of when we peel the vegetables. Isn't there some way, I was thinking, if I grind it in a mixie and create maybe manure out of that, is it not possible? Home waste, very miniature, converting vegetable waste into manure so we can, at least grow more vegetables at home itself. Very, very.
Send me your physical address so that I can send you after the lockdown one device which you don't need to grind also, and you can safely dispose of these peels except the citrus food and the onions. These two things, if you don't waste put into that, it can very easily convert it into manure, and you can keep it into your back gallery, or if you have a backyard, and you can simply keep it.
That's good. That's
Very
good.
much available.
Fabulous.
Great. I think we are almost out of time. I thank the panelists again for their time. If there are no other questions that any one of you would like to take, which has come up, I'll probably make the yes, Dr. Fatke. Yes.
There is one question which has been asked. How can ASHAs and ANMs do the examination of patients and women? I think we have already covered it as to how little bit of telemedicine can be practiced. And even ASHAs and ANMs, if they are at the local site as well, they can do simple messaging, do simple WhatsApp, and try to reach their patient. And it is not at all difficult.
Thank you, Dr. Fatke, for that. I think we can probably. I'll take this honor of closing this. A very experienced panel here. We have learned today of all the different therapies which are out there, which people are testing. The key point there, what Dr. Phadke said, that none of these are really a closed deal yet. People are working on it. There are a lot of evidence needs to be built on it. It is not enough to say that there seems to be a trend because of a medicine. When doctors work with patients, they need to have a decent amount of certainty of when a therapy is being administered, and that is still been built. It is being built at an alarming rate, but it is not yet there for any one particular drug. Some of them are front runners, but Dr. Phadke has clearly outlined that, and there's a significant amount of work going on in India and around the world. But Professor Ravi has outlined the entire path all over again in such a short period of time as to how we must look around us to find problems which are affecting a large number of people, and then to find solutions, to test solutions. And then there are teams in IIT and several other institutes who are open to all suggestions coming from people who have tried it out at some level and reaching out to them. This one of the key things he has mentioned is the extreme openness of collaboration that COVID-19 has brought out. And I think that as normal people, as entrepreneurs, as scientists, we must try to explore the openness. People are ready to listen to ideas, but it's always useful to get some validity of a thought before reaching out to people. Dr. Rajesh Biniwale, he has touched upon some incredible points, starting from how do we dispose of all these masks that we are talking about, to actually how to track domestic waste disposal, and how to use surveillance tools as we go forward, and not just surveillance tools for sewage, but how can this be online? Is there some way where the surveillance can actually go on with online methods, wherein it not only detects but also filters? Because by the time you detect, the sewage has already gone 10 kilometers. So that's a very interesting point that Rajesh Biniwale has said. I think this is incredibly useful. Every day I read the newspapers, and the first thing that I think every time is the plight of the uncollared workforce finding their way back to their roots. And I'm reminded of Agnipath. I mean, staying in Mumbai, I cannot stay away from movies enough. And the lines from Agnipath keep on hitting me every morning. And then I read about the heroics of the frontline health workers, the back-end scientists and technologists who are working. And then I get reminded of the famous lines by Rabindranath Tagore,
Hello.
where the mind is without fear and the head is held high,
Hello.
where knowledge is free. And where it ends this poem, he says that into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my father, let my country away. With those thoughts, I thank the panelists here for their time, their work, especially for sharing one thing in this age of extra overload of information, the one thing which has become really scarce, and that is knowledge. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anirban and Maharashtra University Society. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Anirban.
Thank you.